Good morning and welcome back to Marty's Tying Bench. I'm putting together Vice Squad kits for this session, and I've chosen a Partridge soft hackle pheasant tail to be specific. This is a pattern that Judson Knowles did for Vice Squad several years ago, kind of a guest host, and I thought I'd resurrect it and put it together in kits. It's a good little fly. Now I've tied it on a Dai Riki 070 size 12. Pretty much any standard shank hook will do. Partridge only comes in a narrow range of sizes, so 12s and 14s seem to be the best. You can tie some 10s, and if you're careful, find some small feathers, you can tie 16s and 18s. You want to use a thin thread. You don't need a bulky thread, and you don't want to build up, so I've got UTC 70 denier. Red is preferred. Black will work. Now, I'm going to tie in a rib. This is a pheasant tail, basically. And we're skipping the tail. This is emphasis on the soft hackle. Probably more of a caddis imitation than anything else. You could put a tail in this just fine. I'm going to tie that wire in the length of the shank, and you want to stop up on the straight part of the hook. Your better looking wet flies all have straight shanks. If you want the curve, you use a scud hook. So, pheasant tail body, 6 strands seems to work pretty good. 5 will work, 7 will work. A lot of times it depends on where you are on the pheasant tail. But it's one of those where you don't want too much and you don't want too little. I've trimmed those tips off because they tend to slide out when you tie them in. And we'll just bind those down along the length of the shank. Now this is a fuzzy body anyway, so this doesn't have to be tapered or particularly smooth. And when I wrap the pheasant tail forward, I want to change hands so that it doesn't twist, so that I can lay those fibers in one layer next to each other with very little overlap. Just gives a neat slender body. Now I'm going to counter wrap as I rib forward so that if any of those pheasant tail fibers break, they won't have a chance to unravel completely by traveling in between these ribs. This way each fiber is bound down at several places by the counter-wrapped copper rib. Now I've left quite a bit of room up in front because I'm going to tie a peacock head, and then I need room for the soft hackle. Now I'm just going to get by with one strand of peacock. And as you've seen me do this before, I like to just kind of tie it in, leave the thread where it is. I wrap forward and then back to the thread. A couple turns to tie it off. Turn through the peacock just to make it bulletproof, and there we go. Now for the partridge feather, I've kind of prepared one here by gently pulling the fibers back away from the tip. You'll see that the fibers here at the end are relatively short compared to the fibers at the other end. So there's no way you're going to make wraps of this and have a consistent length on your fibers, so don't expect that. I'm going to lay this down and tie it in, but if you notice I'm tying it in across some of the fibers. I'm not just right there on the bare stem. If your hackle or partridge spreads out, just leave it there. If it's all bundled up, then trim it out so that you don't have a lump that affects the action of this thing. Couple turns in front will stand the feather up, make it a little easier to do your wraps. Now anything fuzzy up here on the stem end I've preened away, so there's really only a limited amount of hackle, and you only need a wrap or two. 1.5 is perfect, 2 is okay. Anything more than 2, it starts to get too bushy. So there's one. And there's a half. Work my thread up through there. Very gently pull the feather back and get a turn or two in front. And then trim that extra off. See, I only used a small portion of that. But you'll get a feel for how many turns it's going to take to get the volume of partridge that you like. And less is better. A couple of whip finishes to make a distinct but small head. And we're good. Soft hackle pheasant tail. A good addition to your box.